Hello and welcome to the season 5 of my podcast What's in a Story, titled Snippets from Forgotten Pages of History of South Asia. I am Lopamudra Moitro, an anthropologist, writer, translator and columnist, and in my podcast I read stories from my books on India and South Asia. The stories of this podcast are mostly from folklore and mythology and history, and I introduce each story with some additional information from the pages of history, archaeology, geology and others, which actually helps to place the stories within a specific context. In this season, we will be looking at some lesser known or completely unexplored and forgotten stories from history, which has been put together in my books through the help of old books, newspapers, gazetteers, numismatic or epigraphical evidences, which will be mentioned in the introduction of each story. These also help to provide a possible time of the origin of the story. Thanks to you listeners, this podcast, which began as a small individual effort of mine last year in May 2025, today reaches across 12 countries, which apart from India includes Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Singapore, France, Russia, Austria, Germany, UK, Poland, Brazil and the USA. And all this has only been possible for all the listeners and their wonderful support. Let's listen to today's story of season 5 of my podcast What's in a Story, titled Snippets from Forgotten Pages of History of South Asia. The story: The Legend of Tai Pak Kung or Tong Atchew. And I read this from my book How the World Was Born, Wondrous Indian Myths and Legends by Aleph Book Company. While Chinese travelers, chroniclers, historians and pilgrims like Yuan Tsang, Fa Hien and I Sing visited India down the course of history, this is the story of one Chinese settler in Bengal who became a revered legend with time. This is the story from the 18th century of a Chinese trader named Tong Atchew, as mentioned in the British colonial records. Also referred varyingly as Yang Dazhao, Yang Daijang, and Yang Taichao. Little is known about the early life of Atchew, except for the fact that he was probably a tea trader who traveled for decades. Today, Atchew is revered as a sacrosanct figure, like a deity, and this forms an important part of local beliefs as well. In the Baj ferry ghat near Kolkata, which is a serene place, an important incident took place once. This ferry ghat is around 33 kilometers from the city of Kolkata, and it is a historic place, as I mentioned, because it is famous to be the place where Swami Vivekananda landed on the 19th of February in 1897 after returning from his famous Chicago trip. However, what is least known is that very close to this ferry ghat stands a small town called as Achipur, famous for a Chinese legend associated with Tong Atchew, or as he is famously and locally referred to simply as Achi Saheb. Note to all listeners, the word Sahib here denotes a foreigner and should not be confused with the representation of a social hierarchy. I continue. Among the local Chinese population from various parts of the region, including Kolkata, he is famously known even today as Tai Pak Kung, meaning biggest grandfather or godfather. The story of the association of Tong Atchew with Bengal began a few centuries ago. A Chinese businessman by profession, Tong Atchew, arrived in the region and settled down there around the late 18th century. In the British Gazette, he is also referred to as Yang Dazhao, Yang Daijang, and Yang Taichao. However, there is very little evidence about his early life and his life before he arrived in India. Atchew was most probably a businessman who dealt in the trading of tea. According to British records, after his arrival in Bengal in 1778, Atchew applied to the colonial government for a piece of land to set up a sugar mill. At that time, Warren Hastings was the Governor General of colonial India. Note to listeners, this was between 1772 to 1785. I continue. He was very keen to increase trading contacts with China and make profits for the British East India Company. He was trying to open up new routes and connections with China. To fulfill the mission, he was eager to send envoys to the East. One of his envoys to the East was Samuel Turner. He was Hastings' cousin and was also a diplomat and a traveler. He was sent to Tibet to bring tea saplings for the plantations which were just spreading across the Assam region in colonial India. Thus, Hastings saw the request of Atchew as an immediate reason to be connected with and granted him the land to build his factory. Atchew was granted a land of 650 bighas. Note to listeners, 1 bigha generally equals to 0.25 to 0.62 acres depending on where you are living in India. I continue. So he was granted a land of 650 bighas with an annual rent of rupees 45, which in those days was a pretty steep price. Gradually, the little town became popular because of Atchew's mill. To work in his mill, Atchew got indentured laborers from China who also settled down in the region. Over a period of time, many more Chinese immigrants came over to the same area and settled down. From the mid-18th century onwards, the community of Chinese grew. More settlers grew in and around the erstwhile region of Kolkata, including the area of Bobazar, and much later spread to the area of Tangra. Both of these regions at present are parts of northern and southern Kolkata. The reason for the many migrants seeking a life outside their homeland was the unrest in southern China, which intensified by the 18th century. This made many Cantonese migrants from Shihui County search for settlements abroad. By mid-19th century, many other migrants travelled from Guangzhou, that is Canton, to Malaya and also British India. Later, many migrants from CE and Hakka also came to Kolkata. With the local Chinese community growing substantially, the popularity of the local beliefs and customs also found their unique platform of expression. The name of Tong Atchew was already famous, as were the stories of his local business providing work to many Chinese migrants across several years. The name Atchew gradually became a word of reverence and through time acquired a very sacrosanct space amongst the local Chinese population. The pronunciation of the name also changed and gradually Atchew was mispronounced as Achu, from where it became Achi, and it is believed that from this word the title of the town is referred to as Achipur, or the region of Achi. Atchew was probably manufacturing alcohol along with sugar, which is evident from the final sale notice of the mill that was issued after his death in 1783. According to a letter from the East India Company attorney attempting to extract money from the executor of Atchew's estate, a notice was issued for the reselling of the factory. This notice of sale is found in the Calcutta Gazette, dated 15 November 1804. This notice mentioned that the estate, along with, quote, all buildings, stills, sugar mills and other fixtures, unquote, were up for sale. The very mention of the stills indicate that probably Atchew was also brewing alcohol from the sugarcane. With the closure of the factory, all the labourers were disbanded and many started to move towards Kolkata. Thus, the local Chinese community kept growing in Kolkata till as recent as the 1950s. Today, there remains no trace of Atchew's mill in Achipur, and one can only see Atchew's tomb, located in an area called Chinaman Tola. The tomb is within a compound which also has a Chinese temple and the temples of Bogong and Bopu, the god and goddess of the earth, locally referred to as Khura and Khuri. It is also locally believed that these deities originally belonged to Atchew. After him, they were placed within the temple, and ever since, the locals have been worshipping them as their own. Atchew's tomb is a horseshoe-shaped structure, painted red, and the precinct is very close to the banks of the river Hooghly. It is also stated that the original tomb was washed away due to the changing course of the river. However, the existing tomb and temple is still venerated in remembrance of the prosperous trading days, a historical past and a beginning from centuries ago. Though Atchew is often mentioned as the first Chinese to arrive in Bengal region, in the erstwhile Bengal region, in common parlance, historians state otherwise and mention that when Atchew came to the region, there were already many Chinese migrant workers living in the erstwhile Bengal region. However, many Chinese residents in Kolkata still maintain the belief that Atchew was the first settler in the region, arriving from their homeland in China. According to this belief, Yang Dazhao, known as Atchew, holds the distinction of being the first to land on the shores of the Hooghly River. Many Chinese from Kolkata also recollect paying a visit to the place of the ancestor, who they refer to as Tai Pak Kung, or Sugar Plantation Master. The tomb was reconstructed in 2004 by the Yixing Huiguan, which is the oldest Cantonese guild in Kolkata, dating to 1838. Following tradition, Chinese from various parts of Kolkata often pay a visit to the sacred place and visit the tomb of Tai Pak Kung. This pilgrimage is their way of paying homage to the departed soul and also seeking blessings for a prosperous future. To the inhabitants of Achipur, Atchew remains a historical figure from the days of yore. On the banks of the river Hooghly, he is fondly referred to as Achi Saheb, as has been mentioned earlier. The legend also connects to the general belief that Achi Saheb will look after the well-being of all the creations of nature.